Apple doesn't make MacBooks in the 17-inch size anymore. They sell 16-inch machines, but those start at $2,500, which is a bit steep. You can pick up a used 17-inch unibody machine for just a couple of $100s though. Despite having a design around a decade older than anything you can buy new now, there are actually some things these big Macs can do that aren't possible on newer laptops. First of all, they're quite upgradable, so you can get one and add a lot more storage and RAM later. We're talking 2 SSDs in one laptop, as well as going from say 4 to 16 GB of memory. Aside from just the upgrade options though, there are some features present you just don't see anymore. This right here is an Express Card 34 slot. It's like having a little PCIe slot on the side of your laptop, and you can add accessories like extra USB ports, camera card readers, and even faster Wi-Fi antennas to your 17-inch MacBook. Express Card was largely dropped in the mid-2010s, especially with the advent of USB-C. There's simply nothing quite like it though. I'm using my Express Card slot to add a USB 3 port to my machine, giving it 4 USB ports in total. There are several other seldom seen ports on these 17-inch MacBooks too. My 2010 model has in total 3 USB ports, a MagSafe charging port, one for Ethernet, one for FireWire, a mini display port, a DVD drive slot, audio in, audio out, and a Kensington lock. Aside from these extra things, 15 and 17-inch unibody MacBooks actually had an anti-glare option for their displays at purchase. So instead of this glossy display that would pick up reflections while used outdoors or in a bright environment, you could get a matte screen which would dull these reflections, making it easier to see what you were looking at. These days, it's not hard to find a MacBook with an anti-glare screen, you just have to look for the ones with silver bezels instead of black. Well, the 2009 to 11 unibody MacBook Pros are the finest 17-inch laptops Apple ever released by any measure. So let's have a look at those. Starting at the bottom, the 2009 17-inch is equipped with an Intel Core 2 Duo CPU. You don't see those a lot anymore, and that's for good reason. 2 cores and a max clock speed of 3.06 GHz is gonna struggle with modern operating systems as well as apps. There are up to 8GB of RAM on board, which can be upgraded or swapped out by the user, but 8GB is the hard limit there. There are 2 GPUs inside 2009 17-inch Pros, the GeForce 9400M, which is integrated into the CPU and shares its memory with it, then the GeForce 9600M, which is a dedicated GPU which has its own 512MB of graphics memory. Neither of those two are stellar by any standards these days. Beyond that though, there are a few problems the 2009s are known to develop over time. Firstly, because of poor adhesive work, the screens sometimes separate from the bodies of these laptops like this near the hinge area. This is easier to replace than fix, really. Secondly, and more severely, a number of these MacBooks have stopped responding to presses of the power button over the years. One of the capacitors is responsible for this, and while it's fixable at a microsoldering level, this won't be cheap unless you know how to do it yourself. So 2009 17-inch MacBook Pros are great looking and still have that impressive upgradability factor. They're just let down by relatively weak parts and a slight chance of failure after purchase. The upside of this is that they're the cheapest 17-inch machines on the market, really. If you're just going to boot it every now and again to watch films and maybe write some emails, you should be okay, but it might be better to look for something newer. The newest of the bunch is the 2011 unibody 17-inch MacBook Pro. These were really highly anticipated at their release, but if you know your stuff about MacBooks, you'll know they didn't live up to the hype. They dropped with 2nd generation i7 processors sporting 4 cores as well as up to 16GB of RAM, and seriously impressive graphics, this time from AMD. If pulled off correctly, Apple would have struck gold in 2011. This 17-inch MacBook Pro may have gained a cult following even bigger than the 2012 unibody machines due to its larger display, but it just wasn't to be. The parts inside this laptop were too powerful, creating too much heat. Apple hadn't put enough care into its motherboard fabrication either, which exacerbated the problem. Almost straight after their release, people started getting complete graphics card failures on their 2011 17-inch MacBook Pros. These were $2,000 machines, and they were just dropping like flies. So while the 2011s are, on paper, impressive laptops, there's really no point in buying one. Eventually they will fail, and you'll be left with quite an expensive aluminium paperweight. Probably the most sensible 17-inch MacBook to buy right now then is the 2010 model. The top spec option has a 2.8 GHz Intel i7 inside, which does only have 2 cores. It can boost up to 3.5 GHz though, which is just about workable these days. It's a fair bit better than that 2009 Core 2 Duo, with a Geekbench score almost a quarter higher in both single and multi-core workloads. Like other large Intel MacBooks, the 2010 17-inch has 2 graphics chips inside. The Intel HD GPU is integrated into the CPU and used for low-power tasks such as normal OS animations and day-to-day web browsing. The dedicated GPU inside this Mac is the GeForce GT 330M, which has 512MB of dedicated video memory. While it's something the OS can switch to if it needs more power than it can get through the integrated GPU, the 330M is far from impressive. It was barely scratching mid-range status at the time, and just a couple of years later, the 2012 MacBook Pro would come with graphics over twice as powerful, despite being a smaller, thinner laptop. Storage options are pretty impressive though. There are 2 SATA 2 ports inside the 2010 17-inch, one for the storage drive and one for the DVD drive. Each space can be emptied and replaced with an SSD of your choosing for a faster operation though. This is great, especially if you want to dual boot Windows and macOS. RAM is replaceable on these machines, although it will only work reliably with 8GB installed at maximum. It's a cheap way of getting a bit more performance out of your laptop, really. I haven't actually mentioned the quality of all of the screens on these 17-inch MacBooks. Each 17-inch unibody machine comes with a resolution of 1920 by 1200. For something of that age, it's seriously impressive. A lot of low-end and some mid-tier laptops today launch with screens of lower quality. As I mentioned, you'll have the option to equip either a glossy or matte display. While the choice is yours, I can't recommend going with the anti-glare matte option enough at this point, if you can find one. I say that because it can be hard shopping for 17-inch MacBook Pros these days. Obviously, you're restricted to used ones right now, and my favourite place to find those is on eBay, or sometimes Facebook Marketplace. I found my 2010 17-inch on eBay for £125 earlier this year. That was a pretty good deal as it came with the anti-glare screen and was in great condition. Mine is only the base model i5 variant though, so not the most power I could find in one of these. If like me you're shopping in the UK, I try and shoot for something below the £150 price tag. In the US, perhaps $200 is a good limit to avoid going over. In any case, the 17-inch MacBook Pros may not be able to compete with any of the modern 16-inch machines in performance, but they're still great if you don't need a powerful computer and just want that big screen. Watching a film on a laptop of this size is a great experience, for example, and if you want to multitask by playing a YouTube video on the side of the screen while you're writing a document, for example, you're golden with a screen like this. So that's all I've got for today. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you especially to my Patreon members who support my ability to make videos every week. If you want to talk tech on the What's on Your Screen Discord, the link is in the description down below.